My parents forged a deed and brought movers to evict me from my $3.8 million estate. They didn't know my lawyer, and cops were in the kitchen waiting. Hi there, Reddit. Now, envision this image. For the entirety of your life, you have been under the impression that the concept of family genuinely carries some significance. Then, one day, your biological parents, who hardly raised you, walk up on your porch with these smug, predatory smiles, thinking that they have just taken the entire $3.8 million bequest that your beloved grandparents left behind right out from under you. When they look you in the eye, they present you a piece of paper and tell you that you are going to be fired by Friday. Nevertheless, I must tell you that the look of complete and utter dread that appeared on their faces when they returned with those movers and saw exactly who was waiting on the doorstep. Unquestionably irreplaceable. This is Marcus. Despite the fact that I am 29 years old and work as a financial analyst, I never in a million years imagined that I would be fighting my own blood over something that my grandparents had spent their entire lives constructing. When I received my degree in finance, my very first goal was to make certain that their $3.8 million estate was secured in such a way that it could not be breached by anything, not even a nuclear weapon. This was my extremely first priority. How come? The reason for this is that I had been observing the vultures circle for 20 years. My mother, my father, and my younger sister were the vultures that were responsible for this. You need to know the complete history in order to have a complete understanding of why I went to such severe and neurotic lengths. This is not merely a tale about wealth or belonging to a luxurious home. This is about 23 years of being manipulated, feeling suffocated by entitlement, and witnessing people who were supposed to be my family treat the most kind and kind-hearted people I have ever met, like a bottomless ATM. Put on your seatbelt and get something to drink, because this is about to become quite nasty. During the time when I was 6 years old, my grandparents, Arthur and Eleanor Vance, were responsible for my upbringing. To chase massive career opportunities in Florida, my biological parents, Richard and Brenda, practically left me at their doorstep in Boston. They were determined to pursue these opportunities. But in all honesty, on the other hand, what they were really looking for was a life that was completely free from the responsibilities of parenthood, and they were bouncing around crazily between various schemes to become wealthy quickly. Every single one of their projects was a complete and utter failure despite their best efforts. Still to this day, I can vividly recall the day when they left me behind. When I was 6 years old, I was standing on the brick path that encompassed the driveway of my grandparents. At the time, I was holding a stuffed golden retriever and a little luggage that had seen better days. In the meantime, my father, Richard, was just tapping his foot and checking his watch while my mother, Brenda, was acting out these dramatic, fake tears for the neighbors to witness. They kept saying, "It's just temporary, buddy," over and over again, just until we get settled in our new executive roles. The executive roles in question entailed the sale of various health supplements that were imported and not regulated, which ultimately turned out to be a gigantic pyramid scheme. They were completely deprived of everything within a span of 8 months. But by the time they reached their lowest point, I had already reached a point of profound contentment with Arthur and Eleanor. They were already being referred to as Grandpa and Grandma by me. During the little time that I had spent with my biological parents, I had already experienced feelings of more safety, security, and love than I ever had before. Not just any house, but the house I grew up in was special. It was a stunning brownstone that had been built in the 1890s, and lived in a historic neighborhood in Boston. Original mahogany woodwork, enormous stained glass windows in the stairs, and a library with bookshelves that reached from floor to ceiling and one of those rolling ladders were all features associated with this property. Since the beginning of time, Grandpa Arthur's family had owned and lived in the house. The structure was constructed by his grandfather, who had been a prosperous maritime businessman. Over the course of several decades, it was scrupulously preserved and passed down. It wasn't simply the brownstone that was involved. As well as that, there were rental properties. A magnificent townhouse in Cambridge and a gigantic triple-decker in Somerville are both available for purchase. Grandpa had purchased them in the late 1970s, when the real estate market in Boston was very different from what it is today. He brought them back to life with his own 2 hands and rented them out to families from the working class as well as graduate students at prices that were extremely affordable. He was not a slumlord interested in extorting every last penny from people. Rather, he merely desired a consistent and dependable source of income. The value of those properties alone is around $1.4 million at the present time. Then there were the things that were invested. Grandpa Arthur had worked for 40 years as an actuary at a major insurance firm. His lifestyle was unassuming. He drove a sedan that was 10 years old, and he was a diligent saver. Index funds, municipal bonds, and blue-chip stocks were the components that he included in his investment portfolio. No Bitcoin, no day trading, and nothing flashy to talk about. Simply growth that is steady, calculated, and solid. I was a senior in high school when I discovered that their portfolio had a value of more than $1.2 million. By the time you factor in the brownstone, the total value of the estate was somewhere near $3.8 million. There is no insignificant alteration. On the other hand, I solemnly declare that the money was never an issue for me. For me, that brownstone served as a paradise. I gained an understanding of what it is like to experience love that is not conditional. Every morning, when I woke up, I would be greeted by the aroma of Grandma Eleanor's freshly baked goods and coffee. Blueberry scones were served on Tuesdays, cinnamon buns were served on Fridays, and sourdough pancakes were served on Sundays. She adhered to this strict schedule. Even before I made the decision to pursue a career in finance, she would call up the stairs, "Rise and shine, my little calculator." During my childhood, this nickname was given to me when I was 8 years old, and I spent an entire Saturday sorting my Pokemon cards solely based on their hit point ratios and attack statistics rather than actually playing the game. Within that library, Grandpa Arthur instructed me on how to play the game of chess. He had an infinite amount of patience, despite the fact that I was a hyperactive child who frequently knocked down pieces. "Risk assessment, Marcus," he would say as he reset the board for the fifth time. "Look, 3 moves ahead, anticipate what the other guy wants, and protect your king. Rushing only leads to ruin." For many years, Sunday dinners were a tradition. When Grandma would prepare enormous roasts, we would sit at the long dining table for a considerable amount of time. We discussed topics such as history, politics in the area, and the subjects that I was studying in middle school. I was never made to feel inferior by them. My viewpoints were taken into consideration by them. I gained a knowledge of honesty from them. My grandfather often said to me, "A man's word is his only true currency, Marcus. Once you bankrupt your reputation, you can never earn it back." While everything was going on, my connection with my real parents and my younger sister, Chloe, was a poisonous wasteland. They would appear once or twice a year at most. Most of the time, it is just around the time of the holidays, when expensive presents are anticipated, or it might be at any time during the middle of summer, when they have exhausted their financial resources and require a bridge loan. By the time I was 10 years old, I had already learned to recognize their excruciating rhythm. When my father would contact me a few days before my Little League games, he would suddenly become extremely engaged in them and act as if he were the father of the year. First, they would show up. In the beginning, there were the smothering and theatrical hugs. Following that, the empty compliments. Then there was the matter of casually strolling around the house, making passive-aggressive remarks about how much the brownstone must be worth at this point in time, or dropping clues about Grandpa's stock holdings. Last but not least, the most impressive part of the visit, the weeping and frantic pitch. The transmission blew on their leased BMW. The chronic migraines that my mother suffered from class tear, which, for some reason, vanished while she was drinking wine, resulted in medical costs. There was a exclusive investment opportunity in luxury timeshares, and all that was required was a $10,000 investment for them to become billionaires. Always in a hurry. All the time, a crisis. On top of that, the loans were never, ever paid back. Over the course of 23 years, not a single penny. When I was 14 years old, my father spent Thanksgiving in the kitchen encircling my grandfather and asking him for $8,000 so that he could invest in a revolutionary cryptocurrency mining firm. Father pleaded with his son, "This is the big one, Arthur," when he was sweating through his inexpensive dress shirt. In order to persuade him to leave the house, so that we could eat turkey without any disturbances, Grandpa wrote him a check for $4,000. This is generational wealth. This startup's founders were indicted by the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, for wire fraud 6 months later. After that, Dad never brought it up again. I asked Grandpa why he gave him the money, and he just sighed, appearing suddenly very old. I was so surprised by his response. "Sometimes, Marcus, you pay money just to learn exactly who someone is. I learned my son is a fool." Up to the time that I graduated from high school, my father had filed for bankruptcy 3 times. In order to give the impression that they were prosperous, they lived extravagantly above their means, rented a luxury apartment that they were unable to afford and publicizing it all over Facebook. This milieu of delusion was the one in which my younger sister, Chloe, who was 7 years younger than I, was brought up through her childhood. She took some of their worst characteristics and turned them into weapons. As soon as she was 16 years old, she had become a nightmare of entitlement. When I was home from college for the winter break, I remember arriving home. These historic pearl necklaces, which were family treasures dating back to the 1920s, belonged to Grandma. Although it is not worth millions of dollars, it is priceless in terms of sentiment. A VIP pass to a music festival was purchased by Chloe after she took 2 of them from Grandma's vanity, pawned them for $400, and then used the money to purchase the pass. When Grandma discovered that they were missing, Chloe instantly fell into uncontrollable sobs and pointed the blame at me, stating that she had seen me snooping around in the bedroom. Almost immediately, my parents stood up for her. "Marcus is in college. He probably needs beer money," Dad shouted out. After Grandpa made his way down to the neighborhood pawn shop, he discovered the slip that contained Chloe's false ID signature on it. This was the moment when the truth was revealed. Is this how my parents feel? She's just a kid, Arthur. She didn't know the value. Don't be so hard on her. Grandpa paid to retrieve them so that they might be returned to him. On that day, I witnessed a portion of his heart breaking. As my grandparents entered their senior years, the relationship went from being merely bothersome to being quite sinister. As a college student, I was attempting to balance a full course load in finance, working a part-time internship, and racing home to assist with the care of my parents. Dad began phoning them on a weekly basis, not to inquire about how they were feeling but rather to inquire about their estate planning, their will, and the specific names of their financial consultants with the purpose of asking extremely pointed questions. The stairs in the brownstone are just too dangerous for them now. We should sell the house and use the cash to put them in a home. Translation: sell the house, dump them in a cheap facility, and pocket the remaining $1 million. Mom would casually email me links to assisted living facilities, saying, "We should sell the house and use the cash to put them in a home." College was an agonizing experience. Congestive heart failure was a devastating condition that Grandpa developed. The early symptoms of vascular dementia were beginning to manifest in Grandma. Because I wanted to be close to home, I decided to commute to a nearby institution. When I was presented with a significant opportunity to study in London, I declined it. I woke up every day at 5:30 in the morning to organize Grandpa's 10 different pills, prepare breakfast for them, commute to class, rush back at noon to check on them, and then study at the kitchen table until 2 in the morning while listening to make sure Grandma didn't wander out. Sadly, my social life failed. Relationships were a joke. However, I did not care. During the time when my parents were abandoning me, they had given up their golden years in order to raise me. Authentic families behaved in this manner. You are present. During my entire life, the day of my graduation was the most bittersweet time. The morning of May was brisk and clear. I was successful in transporting Grandpa there in a medical transport van that I chartered, complete with his portable oxygen tank along with him. I looked over at Grandma, who was sitting next to him and holding his hand. She occasionally forgot the purpose of the ceremony, but she was beaming with pride anytime I looked in her direction. Oh, and Chloe, and my parents? There is no trace of either. Months earlier, they had responded with a yes. I received a text message from my mother at 6:45 in the morning, which said, "Car trouble, so sorry, so proud of you though, catch up soon. Car problems have a reason." The following day, I discovered that they were staying at a casino resort in Connecticut by looking at Chloe's Instagram story. Nevertheless, when I came across that stage and saw Grandpa Arthur crying, with actual tears flowing down his cheeks as he clapped his weak hands, I was immediately overcome with emotion. I came to the realization that I did not require the assistance of my parents. My biological parents were right there with me. Grandpa drew me in close to him that evening, when we were back at the brownstone. His breaths were faint and labored. With a wheezing sound, he said, "Your parents are hollow people, Marcus. They have no center. Don't ever let them hollow you out." After a period of 4 weeks, Grandpa Arthur's heart finally stopped beating while he was sleeping. Within the library, I discovered him sitting in his armchair with a book on his lap. I am unable to adequately express the level of devastation that I experienced. It seemed as if the very basis upon which my universe was built had been shattered. After exactly 5 months had passed, Grandma Eleanor continued to follow him. I am aware of the reality, despite the fact that the physicians referred to it as a quick deterioration, owing to the dementia. Due of a broken heart, she passed away. To put it simply, she did not wish to live in a world that was devoid of Arthur. On one of the few days that she was still conscious, she seized my hand with a horrifying amount of force. "Marcus," she murmured, her eyes gleaming with brilliant clarity. While I was sobbing into her blankets, I made a promise to her. "Arthur and I fixed it. We fixed the house. We fixed the future. They can't touch it. Promise me you won't let them touch it." After a period of 3 days, she passed away. Funeral services were like a circus. When they arrived, my dad and Chloe were dressed in fashionable black, and they were acting out the character of a family that was distraught and grieving. When my grandfather was cornering my grandparents' friends, he was nearly shaking hands like a politician. He wanted to know if they knew when the will reading was going to take place. The fact that I had already been working behind the scenes for more than a year was something that Richard, Brenda, and Chloe were already unaware of. He had his estate attorney, a bright and ruthless woman named Victoria, come to the bedside during one of Grandpa's hospital stays. Victoria was there to represent his estate. The Arthur and Eleanor Vance Family Trust was formed by our organization. Each and every asset, including the brownstone, the Somerville triple-decker, the Cambridge townhouses, the investment portfolios, and the bank accounts, was placed directly into the trust. I was appointed as the only trustee, without any disputes, and I have complete and total power over all of the assets. In a specific section, it was stated that my parents and sister were purposely excluded from inheriting the property since they had been subjected to financial abuse throughout their entire lives. There was a shark named Victoria. This trust is bulletproof, she explained to me. If they try to contest it, they'll be laughed out of probate court. A meeting with Victoria was something that my parents insisted on having after the burial. The explosion was biblical when she calmly informed them that all of the assets were in a private trust and that they were not beneficiaries of the trust. Dad's face turned purple, and he yelled that I had deceived an elderly guy who was nearing the end of his life. A glass of water was hurled at the wall by the mother. Victoria simply glanced at them over her glasses and urged them to go before she phoned building security. Chloe yelled that I was a thief, and that she was going to sue me for her fair share. Victoria then called building security into action. After they passed away, the harassment continued unabated for the first 8 months after their passing. In addition to working at my finance career, and attempting to get over my sadness, I was living by myself in the brownstone. Each day, my phone would explode. Father's text messages threatening to take legal action. They were in danger of being evicted, and Mom left voicemails in which she begged for just one of the rental properties to be assigned to them. Chloe showed up to my door at 11 o'clock at night, pounding on the wood and yelling that I was keeping their treasure that had been saved for generations. I acted on the recommendation of my closest buddy, Julian, who also happens to be an attorney specializing in real estate. I wrote down every single detail, every single message, every single voicemail, and every single Ring camera captured video of Chloe yelling on my porch. A month or so later, there was a complete and utter lack of activity. There were no calls. There are no texts. What I should have understood is that when swindlers remain silent, it only indicates that they are planning. It was necessary for me to travel to Chicago for a 3-day financial conference that I had to attend. There was a Friday afternoon when I arrived back in Boston. After hauling my suitcase up the brick steps of the brownstone, I ultimately decided to take an Uber home. I was fatigued. Chloe and my dad were enjoying a glass of lemonade as they were seated on the sofa on my porch. They were all wearing smirks that were both horrible and triumphant, and they were all pasted together. "Marcus," the father said as he stood up and held his arms out, as if he were the rightful owner of the property. "Welcome home. Or should I say, welcome to our home." I became numb. "What the hell are you talking about, Richard?" As a matter of fact, Mom laughed out loud. "We know about the trust, sweetie. But we also know that trust can be dissolved when the trustee realizes they've made a mistake. We've taken care of the paperwork." Chloe reached into her luxury bag and pulled out a manila folder. She then flopped it down on the patio table nearby. "We transferred the deed, Marcus. A judge agreed the trust was fraudulent. The house is in Dad's name now. It's all filed with the county. You have until next Friday to pack your crap and get out. We're moving in." The sound of my heart beating could be heard in my ears. The folder was opened by me. A photocopy of a quitclaim deed was found within the package. The property was shown to be transferred from the Vance Family Trust to Richard Vance based on the information provided. In addition, my signature was clearly visible at the bottom, right next to a notary stamp. All the same, I had never signed it before. "This is a forgery," I replied, my tone of voice being dangerously calm. "You forged my signature." The scowl came from my father as he entered my personal space. "Prove it. It's filed with the Suffolk County Registry of Deeds. It's public record now, boy. The house is mine. It was always supposed to be mine. You're out by Friday, or I'm having you trespassed by the police." The two of them strolled off the porch, with Chloe giggling as she purposefully bumped into me on the shoulder as she went by. As she sneered, "Enjoy the street, you loser," she said. I didn't freak out about it. Immediately after entering the building, I shut the door and then contacted both Victoria and Julian. At the beginning of the Monday morning, Julian and I went to the Suffolk County Registry of Deeds to do our business. It was the official public record that we retrieved. Indeed, when I looked, there it was. The previous Wednesday, a quitclaim deed was submitted for filing. Although there was a reasonable amount of my handwriting in the signature, the notary stamp was that of a man whose license had expired 3 years prior to the signing being made. Julian's enthusiasm was so intense that he was virtually vibrating. "Marcus, they didn't just forge a document. They filed a forged deed with a government entity. That is felony uttering, felony forgery, and real estate fraud." However, when Julian proceeded to delve deeper into the county records, he noticed that his face had turned absolutely pale. "Oh my God, Marcus, look at this. It was a secondary filing that was attached to the new deed that he retrieved. The house had not been taken by my parents in order for them to reside in it. Dad had used the brownstone as collateral to obtain a $250,000 hard money bridge loan from a predatory private lender on the very same day that they filed the falsified deed. The loan comes with a high interest rate and is secured by the brownstone. They cashed out, I said, and I felt sick to my stomach. Julian exclaimed, worse, with his eyes wide open. They committed wire fraud and bank fraud. They took out $250,000 against a house they don't own, using forged documents. This isn't just a civil dispute anymore. This is federal-level criminal fraud. Immediately, we made our way to Victoria's workplace. Immediately, she submitted a notice of pending action, sometimes known as an emergency lis pendens, in order to freeze the title, and she also submitted an injunction in order to nullify the fraudulent deed. The next thing she did was call a contact she had in the white-collar crime unit of the Boston Police Department that she had previously established. The delivery of everything took place during the course of Tuesday and Wednesday. Documents pertaining to the initial trust, examples of my actual signature, the video footage from the Ring camera showing my father making threats against me, and evidence of the fake bridge loan. Those who were investigating were drooling. It was almost humiliating to crooks worldwide that the paper trail was so glaringly evident that it was almost disrespectful. On Wednesday evening, my father sent me a text message that read, "Movers will arrive tomorrow at 9 o'clock sharp. Have your boxes on the curb or they will be thrown away." In response, I sent a text message that read, "Understood. See you at 9. This morning, Thursday." 23 years of complete and utter lunacy culminated in this moment. I woke up at 5 in the morning. The coffee that Grandma Eleanor enjoys drinking the most was made by me. The chessboard was in front of me as I sat in the chair that Grandpa Arthur had given me in the library. Think about the next 3 steps. You must guard your king. That is just what I had done. Both Victoria and Julian showed up at my residence around 8:30 inches the morning. At 8:45 inches the morning, a police SUV that was not marked pulled into my alleyway, which was hidden from view from the street. My kitchen was invaded by 2 investigators from the fraud squad who were drinking coffee and making idle chatter about the Red Sox. A large moving truck rumbled along the old street at precisely 9 o'clock in the morning, attempting to squeeze through the spaces between the parked automobiles. It pulled up in front of the brownstone and parked down there. The vehicle that was pulled up behind it was Dad's recently leased Mercedes, which was undoubtedly sponsored by the fake bridge loan of $250,000. My parents and Chloe were able to escape. The attire that they wore was exquisite. While Chloe was gazing up at the brownstone, her mother was wearing enormous sunglasses, her father was smoking a cigar, and Chloe was taking a video on her phone, most likely for TikTok. The ramp was lowered by 3 tough movers who jumped out of the truck and lowered it. As he climbed the brick steps, my father hammered on the hefty oak door that was on my door. "Time's up, Marcus. Let's go." I walked out onto the porch after opening the door and stepping out. A single box was not packed by me at any point. A mug of coffee was in my hand at the time. It took a moment for Dad's smug smile to stumble down. "Where's your stuff? I told you, if it's not packed, the movers are throwing it out." "I'm not leaving, Richard," I responded in a manner that was smooth. A snort came from the bottom of the stairs as Mom laughed. "Don't make this harder than it has to be, Marcus. The house is ours. We have the deed." As Victoria emerged from the corridor to take a position next to me, she asked, "You mean the forged quitclaim deed?" She was carrying a briefcase, while wearing a suit that was as sharp as a razor. On my opposite side, Julian emerged from his house. The expression on Dad's face changed. "Who the hell are you?" "I'm Victoria Harrington, the executor and legal counsel for the Vance Family Trust, and this is Julian Reyes, Marcus's personal attorney. We're here to inform you that your fraudulent deed has been voided by an emergency court order as of 8 a.m. this morning." Chloe ceased recording the audio. "Dad, what is she talking about?" The voice of the father trembled as he attempted to exhale from his chest. "You can't do that. A judge signed off on it. I have rights. I'm the son." "No judge gave their approval to anything," Julian stated with a smile on his face. "You forged a signature, used an expired notary stamp, and filed a fraudulent document with the county, which is a felony." "We didn't forge anything," Mom shouted, her voice reverberating down the street as she stood there. "He signed it. He's lying." "That's going to be very hard to prove," I replied, sipping a cup of coffee. "Considering you also used that forged deed to take out a $250,000 bridge loan from Apex Lending. Where is that money, Richard?" The expression on Dad's face gradually lost all of its color. A look on his face suggested that he was about to throw up right there on the brick steps. With a surprise, Mom looked at her father. "Richard, what bridge loan? What is he talking about?" "It was a secret from him. He falsified the deed, took out the loan, and concealed the funds from his own wife, all while he was doing it." Victoria smiled and said, "Oh, things are going to get better. Because you defrauded a licensed financial institution across state lines using a wire transfer, you've escalated this from local real estate fraud to federal wire and bank fraud." Taking a step back, Dad came dangerously close to falling down the stairs, screaming in a panic. "Movers," he cried. "Pack it up. We're leaving, now." A low voice could be heard coming from within the home, saying, "In all honesty, you are not going anywhere." When the two detectives emerged onto the porch, they were wearing badges that were attached to their belts. It is the first time in my entire life that I have ever witnessed a human being deflate in the manner that my father did at that very instant. There was a real buckle in his knees. The cigar fell out of his mouth and rolled down the stairs into the ground below. Richard Vance, Brenda Vance, the lead detective, who was walking down the stairs, said to Brenda Vance, "You're both under arrest for forgery, uttering a false document, and real estate fraud. Mr. Vance, we also have a warrant regarding the fraudulent procurement of a $250,000 loan." When the movers realized they were in the middle of a major crime scene, they literally threw their hands in the air, ran back to their truck, and then walked out of the building without uttering a single word. This caused Mom to begin hyperventilating. She was immediately selling out her husband in order to save herself. No, I didn't know about the loan. I just signed the deed. He told me to sign it," she exclaimed. First, the police officers placed Dad in handcuffs. In fact, he didn't even fight. The realization that he had spent his entire life engaging in fraudulent activities finally dawned on him, and he did nothing except gaze blankly at the ground. Mom, who was crying uncontrollably, was the third person to be placed in handcuffs. Her pricey sunglasses were accidentally dropped upon the brick path, where they broke. Afterwards, there was Chloe. She remained trembling as she stood by the Mercedes, holding her phone in her hand, the entire time. It was then that she yelled out, "Wait," as they were loading our parents into the back of the unmarked SUV. "What about me? Where am I supposed to go? My stuff is in their apartment." The investigator turned his gaze to her. "Are you Chloe Vance?" "Yes. We have evidence you were present when the notary stamp was procured. You're not under arrest right now, but we strongly suggest you don't leave the state. We'll be in touch." Dad peered out the window of the SUV and looked at me as the doors slammed shut completely. Neither anger nor rage could be seen in his eyes. Just a void of terror that is empty. I whispered softly, "Enjoy the street, Chloe," and I repeated her exact words from the previous week. I retraced my steps, entered the building, and closed the massive oak door behind me. Over the course of the past few months, the aftermath has been a non-stop whirlwind. Due to the overwhelming amount of evidence, the legal system moved at a startlingly rapid pace. In light of the fact that the $250,000 cash was discovered concealed within a cryptocurrency wallet, Dad was not granted bail because he was deemed to be a flight risk. He could be sentenced to up to 15 years in federal prison at this time. Even though Mom accepted a plea bargain and testified against him, she is still facing a sentence of 3 to 5 years in prison for her role in the forgery. Due to the fact that they immediately defaulted on the fraudulent bridge loan, the private lender went after their personal assets. It was confiscated everything that they owned. Everything from their bank accounts to the Mercedes that they loaned out. About a month ago, Chloe made an attempt to call me while crying and stating that she was living on the couch of a friend and that she needed money to pay her rent. I reminded her that Grandpa's rule remains in effect, which states that rushing is the path to disaster, and that she ought to have looked 3 steps ahead. After that, I blocked her voicemail. It is still the brownstone where I make my home, now that it's quiet. Sometimes, when I'm sitting in the library, I swear I can smell Grandma's cinnamon rolls or hear the soft clack of Grandpa's chess pieces. I just can't find the words to describe it. During the past week, I completed something that Victoria and I had been working on together. In order to establish the Arthur and Eleanor Vance Foundation, I used a portion of the rental income that was generated from the properties in Somerville. Children who are making their transition out of the foster care system in Boston are eligible for full-ride scholarships and mentoring in the area of financial literacy. Children who do not have parents on whom they can rely. Children who cannot live without Grandpa Arthur in their lives. A significant portion of my parents' lives was spent attempting to steal wealth that they had not earned. At the end of the day, they gave me the perfect opportunity to put them away for good, and they didn't even realize that they were doing it. Not a chance.